Greetings and welcome to Flanagan's Ecologic. I am your host, Ted Flanagan, and today I'm happy to have John Belizaire on the program. He's the founder and CEO of Soluna, a company that is co-locating data centers at renewable energy facilities. He's tapping into what could be considered wasted energy or stranded energy. He's monetizing what would have been curtailed energy. Happy to have John on the podcast today. Hey, John, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I am doing great, Ted. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you on the show and delighted to meet you and to hear all about what you're up to. But let's start off real easy. Where are you sitting? I'm thinking it's New York City or the area, New York.
You are close. I'm just north of New York, about an hour north in the Westchester County area. We moved out a couple of years ago. The city was getting a little too big for the kids.
Yeah.
Not enough, running space and room. And we're now up in the burbs.
And is the company then with you up in the burbs, or are you?
Good question. The company is pretty virtual. We do have a headquarters office in Albany, but the rest of the team is pretty distributed. We've got people in New York, Boston, Atlanta, Texas, Kentucky, California, all over the country.
Yeah.
I've run distributed companies for a while now. I think it's sort of like the thing. These days, you find the best talent possible wherever they are in the world and just let them stay there. And then you use technology to connect people. We do get together physically a couple of times a year to have people connect, and build relationships. But but we're a distributed company.
Yeah, that's really great. So you, before we get into the meat of the matter, you grew up in the New York area, I take it, and then you went off to Cornell for undergrad and grad in computer science, right?
I did. I grew up in Brooklyn, and this was in the late 70s, 80s. New York was a very different place. There's a movie called Escape from New York, and when I watched it, kind of paints New York as a jungle and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, hey, this isn't a movie. This is a documentary. So I did escape New York. I moved to upstate, went to Cornell. I was always interested in computers. I had a Commodore computer for a while, then a Tandy 1000. A lot of folks, depending on who's listening, maybe connecting with me.
Many of the listeners
have no idea what I'm
saying.
saying. Right.
So.
Yeah. And so I was always fascinated by programming and the role of computing in business. And so I went to Cornell to the engineering school and did my undergrad and grad studies in computer science there.
And then I guess there was a gap before you went to the Wharton School. So you were getting
that's right. So I left Cornell and started my career at Intel. Believe it or not, that's where I got a lot of the foundation of my management and leadership skills, put some of my engineering skills to work on a host of really important projects. Andy Grove was still the CEO at the time, so that goes way back. And later, I left Intel and formed a startup in Boston. That was my first entrepreneurial endeavor. I started it with 4 of my closest college friends and grad school friends. And we built and grew that company and then sold it to a company in California. So I zoomed right back to the West Coast, to the left coast. And as part of BEA Systems, which was the company that bought us, fast-growing enterprise software company, they had leadership development programs, which encouraged the management team members to go to business school and get their continued degree. So that's when I went to Wharton.
Sure. What do you think it was that brought out this entrepreneurial spirit in you?
That's a good question. I've always had it. My dad was a journeyman mason, so he's always worked for himself to some extent. He worked. He was a mason. He helped to build some of the hotels in the Bahamas. I'm from the Caribbean originally, and maybe that was in my DNA a bit. But I really became enamored with it in high school.
Yeah.
I was reading about all these interesting large enterprises. I was fascinated by companies that created the computing revolution. The Apples of the world, the Tandys, the IBMs. I actually did an internship with IBM in the city, and I was just fascinated by large enterprise, and I saw myself, I imagined myself building one of those someday. And so I came back to the high school, and I started my own small business at the time. I was selling floppy disks. So my high school was a trade school, so you had to take very specific courses. So you could take machine shop, you could take optical shop, and then they had a computing course that you can take a computing study. So I did programming, and in the room they had these very large mini computers, and then a big computer in this like closet there that you could see, and right. You would put your punch cards together. Again, something that's dating folks. Yep. And then you could store your program on these floppy disks, and they give you the first one, and then the rest you have to kind of go buy that. And so I formed a company to sell those floppy disks, and I had all different colors: red, yellow, green, orange. I bought it from a wholesaler.
Really?
And then, and I sold it to the students in the class. Everybody else was selling M&Ms, and I was selling floppy disks. So I was a nerd in the school. And then from there, I started this typing service. I was a lot of the teachers were taking their master's programs, and they needed a way to get their papers typed. And one of the math teachers, Mr. Hickson, suggested I type his paper up, and then I started this business doing it for all the teachers. And then I saved that money and bought more computing equipment so I can keep, growing in that phase. And I guess the rest is history. In college, continue to do the same little entrepreneurial thing here and there. And, many years later, I ended up starting my first company, knew nothing about doing it. I picked up this book, this alumni book that Cornell would print that would show you where all the alumni were and what cities they were in. And to the extent they registered themselves in the book, you can call them. So there were a lot of entrepreneurs in Boston where I was at the time. And I cold called them and basically said, "Hey, I'm John. You've never met me before. I'm starting a company and I have a million questions. It's my first time. It's not your first time. And I would like some help."
That's great.
And they many of them called back. One of them had me come into his office. This guy was an incredible serial entrepreneur. He built a lot of financial services software companies. And I went to his office, and it's like, "This is what I want to build." Like, I was like, this is a company. Like, this is fantastic, And I sat and met with him in his office, and we just went through every single question I had about fundraising, how to build a business, all this kind of stuff. And as I was leaving, he said one thing that I will never forget. I write about it even to this day, and I practice it. Yeah. He said, if you forget everything I said today, I want you to remember one thing, and that is that the key to success in business is laser focus. Laser focus. Do one thing really, really well and perfect it over time.
How great. How great to have those mentors that were all part of your alumni association.
Yeah.
Well, then was it after Wharton School that you formed this Next Stage LLC? Was this? It seems like you're right into the financial services here.
Yeah. So after Wharton, I'd say like sort of my journey at BA came to an end, and my co-founders and I started a investment company, basically investing our own capital, called like a angel group. And we would invest seed round pre-venture into companies that were creating all sorts of new software technologies and whatnot. After doing it for a few years, we realized a couple of things. A, we were very bad investors.
I was going to say there's a lot of risk.
We were much better. Yeah, we were much better at technology and building companies and understanding what they were doing than choosing the right ones to invest and all of that kind of stuff. There's a science to that. Just like everything, there's a technique and science to it that takes time to build.
Yeah.
But the second thing we learned was that building a business, building a new startup, the technology is the easy part. See, most founders think the technology is the hard part. You have a problem, you're going to solve it and create these new inventions and so forth. And let's say you do that, you just have a technology. You don't have a business yet. Building a business is hard. And the hard part is understanding whether the problem you're solving is big enough to sustain a business for a long time, understanding how to raise capital and position your business appropriately among all the different things that investors want to invest into, right? So you have to start with pain and then work your way backwards to the technology and building the right team, putting together the right capital formation to support that enterprise. And then let's say you get that far, then you've got to expect the journey to be like a roller coaster, right? Sometimes there are going to be lots of wins, and then there's other times there's going to be lots of challenges that you have to go through. And it's a series of making it through those challenges that elevates the company up into the right. So most people expect their company to start at zero and then be this nice straight line up into the right. And in reality, it's more like it goes up, then it goes down in these like sort of swiggly swirls. Then you sort of power through that. Then you get to the next level. Then you keep going up.
You remember the kids game Chutes and Ladders?
Yeah, exactly. You
sometimes you go down and then
sometimes you go down, sometimes you go up. But as long as you're directionally going in the right direction, you're making progress, and that's what most people don't understand. So we left. Kind of defocused next stage and started more businesses, but we took this framework, which is let's start with pain, do real targeted interviewing of the market and understand what their needs are, and then create a company to go solve that problem.
Well, now it sounds like I was listening to one of your recordings. It sounds like you talked to a friend who was doing a renewable energy project was it Morocco in Africa?
That's right.
And you learned about this whole notion that that part of the time they weren't going to be able to sell the output of their, I can't remember what it was. Was it wind, or it was a wind?
It was wind
project, right? And so
right.
they were facing this whole dilemma of what do we do? And you kind of caught wind of that. Sorry, pardon the pun.
Yeah, nice.
Said, well, there may be an opportunity in this challenge.
That's right. I found in my many years as an entrepreneur, as a technologist, I'm attracted to these hard problems that no one's figured out yet. And so you're right. One of my longtime friends and board member was talking to me about this development platform, which is basically a fancy way of saying a company that builds energy projects. And they had this really big wind farm in southern part of Morocco that had stranded energy. There was lots of energy that it would produce that they could not sell or send to the grid. In fact, there was no grid, so it's really no way to send the power out. So the grid was on its way. They were trying to find ways to monetize it. As the grid started to make its way down, they figured out they could monetize a good portion of it, but not all of it. And so the question was, what do we do? How do we, create a project that will have a gap in revenue? So they thought about a lot of different solutions to that: desalinate water, power the local city. There were lots of technical and
could they have sorry to interrupt you, John, could they have just made the project smaller, or was it really a time of use situation?
Exactly. Time of use and there's sort of like a minimum capital outlay that capital providers look to do because they have, let's say, a fixed amount of cost that goes with setting up a project. And so they want to deploy as much capital as possible. And so the idea came to them that maybe computing was a solution because computing is distributed and can consume lots of energy depending on what type of computing you can do. And at the time, Bitcoin was a fast emerging technology. The blockchain was really taking off. This is in 2017, 2018 timeframe. And I got a call and he says, would you like to come look at this project I'm working on? And I said, well, you don't do any software stuff. You're more of a, infrastructure or manufacturing. You don't need sort of like real assets companies. And I said, but I'll come and take a look because you're my friend, and maybe I can be helpful. We'll see. So I did, and I just became, fast forwarding the story, just fascinated by the relationship between energy and the entire world, right? I sort of took the role of energy for granted. My previous company to this was an insurance industry, very obscure, but massive industry, small community, but a very powerful foundational industry in the world. Without insurance, there's really nothing you can really do if you think about it. Energy is the same way. And then blockchain was a really exciting new technology that when I look closer at it, I noticed a lot of the problems we spent a lot of time working on in distributed computing and in computing sciences at Cornell when I was studying were solved or underway to being solved in this technology. It's the first time I saw that combination of powerful capabilities put together like that, and I was just blown away. And I was like, I have to work on these two things because it's so exciting, and it looks really complex and hard, and I just have a hard time not jumping into those types of opportunities. And so for the last 8 years, we've been building a company called Soluna that solves this stranded energy problem on a global basis. Basically, this is a global problem. We want more energy to exist in the world. We can all agree on that. We want more of that energy to be sustainable. I believe most of us can agree on that. Given what's happening in our government right now, it's not clear. And it's also incredible that as more of this technology goes up, it runs into these challenges where the energy can't get from where it's being produced to where it's being used because there are transmission delays or transmission bottlenecks. And most people don't notice, but about 30 to 40% of the energy produced by renewable power plants goes wasted. It actually just never makes it to the grid. And so what we realized during 2020, during the pandemic, was that we could take this idea of putting computing next to renewables and bring it to existing projects, right? Our project was a greenfield, but let's take it to existing projects, and we can actually bring more economic support for the type of energy that we want to see on the grid by using this approach. And it was a lateral way to unlock energy for the future of computing, where computing is going, right? And this was we always envisage, high performance computing or AI, or at the time we were mostly focused on machine learning. But it's funny to say it now. AI is now the fastest growing computing capability and element, and it is its primary bottleneck right now to achieve its mission in life is energy, the access to energy, its abundance, etc. And so people are going around trying to stand up nuclear power plants. Some people are trying to turn coal plants back on, gas, etc. And we're saying, wait a second, there's gigawatts, even terawatt hours of energy just right there on the grid. It's already right there, just being wasted.
Let me unpack a few things that you said. So when you co-locate with a renewable energy facility, let's say a wind farm in Texas or wherever it happens to be, they haven't been able to sell 30 to 40% of what they could have sold. That's their stranded asset. And you must come along and purchase that at a discounted price, purchase that power at a discounted price to make your business model work, right?
That's right. Because I like to say I like to describe it as before John shows up and after John shows up. So before I show up, they're there. They got 100 megawatt wind farm, and 40 megawatts of it just gets wasted. Right. Every I'd say it's seasonal depending on where they are, right? But there are times where the wind is blowing really hard and the grid is saying we don't need all of that energy, so you need to turn it off. And so you'll drive by these wind farms, and about half of the wind farms, or half of the turbines, let's say, are off. They're not
Yeah.
spinning. And you're thinking, wow,
Now, could
that
they?
wind farm.
Question: Could they invest? I mean, I hate to bring up your competition. Could they
Sure.
invest in storage, energy storage,
Yeah.
and suck up some of that power and then sell it back at their higher prices when it's needed by the utility? Or is storage
Yes,
too expensive? It's better to go with you at this point.
right. So, so before John shows up, they have this problem, and there are really two solutions. One is
Okay.
they can, beg the grid to build bigger pipes so that they can push more power down the line. But the grid's just going to say, well, even if we had bigger pipes, there's just not that much demand on the other end, right? Unless we were able to pipe that power to another part of the country that needed the power at that particular time. Like I like to say, in West Texas, the wind is blowing at night. Everybody's asleep in Texas. But maybe the people dancing in the nightclub in Atlanta could use some of that power. So let's ship it over there,
And you remember Buckminster Fuller always said, we have two hemispheres,
Exactly. Exactly.
Anyway, so
the other solution is, why don't they just store it? What couldn't you just store it? And this is what people always ask me at cocktail parties and stuff like that, which I'm happy we're back to doing now. And I say they could store it. So let's say they put a battery back there. For a battery project to be profitable, given the capital expenditure involved in building it, it has to export its energy pretty much every day. So it's not going to be storing it for very long. You couldn't build a battery big enough to store that much energy, right? That's a so that's a second problem. And then secondly, even if you did, you have to export it as often as possible to get the returns, right? Now, the way a battery works, it's a business, just like the wind farm is. It stores energy when the prices are really low, right? So when prices are zero or negative, it's going to suck down that energy, store it, and that's when the turbines will be off, by the way. And then when the winds shift, if you will, right, and the grid really needs more power, it's going to say, hey, let's send that power. Let's send us as much power as you can send us. Well, it turns out you're going to have all the wind power that the power generator can send, plus the battery power that's stored there.
And you're back to the transmission constraint.
You're back to the same problem again. So the battery becomes a problem. What you need is a consumer there. You need a solution that basically consumes that energy at that location. Demand is the problem. And so computing is perfect for that. Computing, there's always demand for computing.
But then here's my question on computing. You only have intermittent sources of supply of power, right? I mean, the developer of the wind farm, say, is going to make his or her most money when he can sell it off to the utility at the highest prices. You're selling to you as a discount. So, but inversely, from your position, how do you deal with the intermittency of power supply for a data center, for an AI data center?
Right. So with this innovation, there's lots of problems you need to solve. One of those is, how do you build a data center that's a flexible data center in its design, not one that needs to be on 24/7. So that's what we do. We've built a proprietary design to data centers that allows it to use energy from the power plant when it's being wasted, use energy from the power plant when it's not being wasted, and use energy from the grid when there's no power from the power plant. And so we actually are less intermittent than you think. If a data center is up 100% of the time, let's say, we're actually in one of our data center designs, 95 to 98% of the time we're up. So intermittency is not as low as you think, actually. And we accomplished that by another innovation, which is how we source the energy. We interconnect into the same substation that the wind farm is using to send its power to the grid. And that substation is a two-way substation. So since we're sitting there right next to the wind farm, as it's producing, we are sucking down a portion of the energy. So if the grid says, hey, tomorrow send me 50 megawatts for a 100 megawatt facility, we'll eat 50 megawatts of it. So the beauty of that is the wind farm can still turn on 100 megawatts if it's able to. The grid will only see 50, and we'll eat the other 50. And again, before and after John, the wind farm now is able to monetize all of its energy now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the data center is able to get really, really low cost power because it was able to consume that 50 megawatts that would otherwise go wasted. Now let's imagine that the wind farm is only able to produce 50 megawatts that day. That's just how much the wind is blowing. And the grid says, send me 50 megawatts, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do then? Well, it turns out that we will eat all of the 50 megawatts that it produces. Okay. And the grid says, hey, we're missing 50 megawatts. And so we'll actually pay them the amount of money they would have received
The higher price. Yeah.
at the higher price. So to them, they're economically indifferent. The grid, no one ever is short of power. The grid will still see the 50 megawatts, et cetera. And then you can do a whole series of different scenarios. But the way we've designed it is we've built a data center that is flexible. Inside that data center, we only put applications that are resilient to the loss of power. So we used to call it batchable. We now call it sort of flexible applications. And those include things like crypto mining, which is highly resilient to power loss. It can wake up and basically pick up where it left off. And the network is designed to be resilient as well. And then the next thing we're planning to do is to build another generation of data centers, a new design that's also designed to be behind the meter, but focus on AI workloads, where if you're training a large language model on a new data set and you say, I'm going to train this thing for 60 days, right? It's okay if it's off for a couple of minutes. In fact, it already turns off every few minutes to checkpoint the data so it doesn't lose track of the learning that it's had. So you can design the data center, the power model, and everything to sort of live with that and still deliver the same uptime, exactly the same uptime that you would get in, let's say, Virginia, right?
Yeah.
But at a much, much, much lower cost.
How great, John. We only have a few minutes left, but I want to touch on two things. The second being some of your projects in particular, but your reaction. You mentioned, the extent to which utilities are going, and companies like Amazon and Google and Facebook or Meta are all going to get power. And I just wanted to get your quick reaction. I already know what it is, but I just read about Rick Perry, former governor of Texas, wanting to put 4 1-gigawatt nuclear reactors at a site in Texas called the Donald J. Trump Advanced Energy and Intelligence Campus. 18 million.
To name it after the POTUS, but
very smart strategically, I guess. We'll give him credit for that. But I think in less than 15 seconds, what is your reaction to that? I think you're going to say it's just crazy when we have all of this stranded energy out there that isn't going to be controversial at all.
Yeah, I do think it's crazy. It'll take a long time to get those power plants up. If it's meant to solve a near-term problem, it's probably not the best solution because it's going to take years and years to stand them up unless there's some hyper-accelerated executive order that allows him to go faster than you normally would with nuclear. But then it's nuclear, so you've got to be really careful, right?
Right.
There's gigawatts already available on the grid that can be used for these workloads. There's a big push to build these, mega campuses that have gigawatts of energy in one location for these new computing infrastructure platforms. So I understand why he's building these hyper concentrated capabilities. But technology doesn't stand still. Innovation doesn't stand still. I would not be surprised if within a short 2 to 3 years, AI training is a distributed model, right? Where you don't need 1 gigawatt in one location. You can have a gigawatt spread around the grid, right? And a few hundred megawatt locations that all work together in a combined, unified capability. We're already seeing financing for companies that are talking about things we were talking about 8 years ago, just, ideating on how this could look, where you can shift workloads right across the network. If there's no stranded energy here, shift it to another location. That's all going to be invented, and so the move to deploy these sort of massive facilities is one idea, but that's not the only idea.
Yep. Talk about some of your projects. We've talked about your concept, which I think is brilliant, and I know you've got Project Dorothy and Dorothy 2 and Project
Right.
Grace. John, is this real? Are you really doing this at this point?
We are. We have 75 megawatts of it spinning already. We're building a second phase of Dorothy 2, that will bring us up to 123 megawatts of capacity. And the goal is to continue to grow that capacity. We have like this internal target of doubling that every year over, several years. And the question is, how can you see that doubling, and where is that coming from? Well, it turns out that we have close to 3 gigawatts, 2.8 now, of pipeline of projects. And that comes from wind and solar. We announced our first solar project this year, Project Annie, that's 75 megawatts. We have almost 800 megawatts of projects in either construction, development, or operations at this point. And so in a short, it took us a long time to kind of get this going, but all of a sudden it's just like dominoes now.
And some of these you're locating data centers at existing projects, and others,
all of them. Yeah. So actually, one of our earlier projects, which was focused on designing the data centers and making sure they work, we put them on the grid. So there was no wind farm there, but we did have the need to sort of curtail the site, turn it on and off, so that flexible design we can test. But we knew there was always power. And then we perfected that design and took it to a wind farm. So Dorothy 1 was the first version of like bringing it to an actual power plant. And then we got that working, and it's been working for over 2 years now. And so now what we're doing is doubling the size of Dorothy, and then we're just cookie cutting Dorothy across the grid. Like we're basically building more of them, and Cotty is the next one, and then Hetty, then Ellen, then Annie, then Rosa. There's a whole bunch of them. The data centers are all named after famous historical alive and not alive scientists and innovators. We call them badass catalyzers. So Dorothy Vaughan is Dorothy. She was the human computer, Hidden Figures team that drove our mission to the moon. Katie Carrico. Cotty is named after Katerina Carrico, the now Nobel Prize winning scientist that helped us develop mRNA vaccines. Sophie is named after Sophie Wilson, the designer of the ARM processor, things like that. We find that, it's a tribute to them, because their innovations, every single one of them built an innovation that was really hard work to do. It's really hard to kind of crack the code, if you will, on it, but it has changed the world in the process. And that's what we're hoping to do with our data centers and this approach to energy.
I love it. All right, last question. You look healthy. You look happy. You look like you've got a good balance. I know you've got kids. How do you maintain how do you keep fresh? How do you keep those brain cells fresh, creative, innovative, while you've got the understandable stresses of running a big business?
Oh, thanks for that. It is definitely stressful. And the way I balance it is a couple of ways. I have a ritual in the mornings where, after I get the kids off to school or to camp, now that it's summertime, I spend some time, at least an hour or so, just doing some form of exercise. I'll either run or do some weight training, cycling, and meditate. I get my head space in the right place. A little bit of journaling. I'll sort of do, I have an exercise called Rose, Thorn, Bud. Rose is all the wins. We have to remind ourselves that as hard as things are, there's always one or two wins, and the small or big, there's still wins. Thorn is all the challenges and things that we're sort of trying to work through. Sometimes they're real business challenges. Sometimes they're challenges at home. Sometimes they are self reflection. They're I have this view that leaders, company builders, entrepreneurs, their biggest challenge, if building a business is climbing the mountain, they're climbing the mountain, and they're going through the rigorous process of traversing that space. most of the work is actually themselves. When they get to the top, they realize they were the mountain the whole time. So working through the challenges of that is something I try to do. And then Bud is what are you looking forward to? What are you excited about? So I try to frame myself as much as possible in the mornings, so that keeps me fairly balanced. I read a lot. I read very broadly things that are in my industry, beyond my industry, fiction, nonfiction, and it kind of helps keep my brain fresh. I'm always trying to learn as much as possible. I see myself as a lifelong learner. And then the final thing is I spend time with my family and friends, both immediate and extended. And I have found that to be very fulfilling. And just being, connected. I meditate and really connect to the broader universe, if you will.
So great. John, thanks so much for being on the podcast, and congratulations on your successes, and we'll look forward to hearing more.
Thanks, Ted. It was an absolute pleasure.
Take care. That's it. Thanks for listening to Flanagan's EcoLogic. We'll see you next time.